In 1998, a PR consultant was working with big fossil fuel companies. He was grappling with a problem. The Kyoto Protocol had just been signed. This landmark agreement reflected the scientific consensus, saying that human-made CO2 emissions were driving global warming and threatening climate catastrophe. It committed governments to cutting carbon to avert this calamity. But for the PR consultant and fossil fuel companies, this wasn't a step forward. It was an existential problem. If governments cut carbon, that would mean less oil bought and sold. It would mean small dividends for big oil's shareholders, smaller bonuses for executives. Profits for fossil fuel companies were under threat, and they couldn't have that. So the PR consultant devised a plan. In a memo to the Trade Association of the fossil fuel companies, he outlined a plan, a comprehensive international campaign to change public opinion on the climate emergency. The plan aimed to cast doubt on the scientific consensus by funding think tanks and media campaigns and buying off a tiny minority of scientists. The campaign aimed to manufacture doubt about the science of the climate emergency. The PR consultant wrote that the goal of the project was, and I quote, for the public to recognize that significant uncertainties exist in climate science. Victory, he said, would be achieved when those promoting the Kyoto Treaty on the basis of science appear to be out of touch with reality. But it wasn't that fossil fuel companies were ignorant of the science, far from it. In 1979, a paper from the global oil giant Exxon said that burning fossil fuels will, and I quote, cause dramatic environmental effects in the coming decades. A few years later, another memo warned of potentially catastrophic consequences of a refusal to cut emissions. An internal document in 1982 admitted that the science was unanimous. But because their profits were threatened, fossil fuel companies buried the truth. Just as the PR consultant advised, fossil fuel companies poured millions into think tanks, scientists, and politicians spreading climate denial. When President George W. Bush rejected the Kyoto Protocol and its ambition to cut emissions in 2001, he told a fossil fuel-funded lobby group that his decision was, and I quote, in part based on input from you. Today, while the fossil fuel industry's methods might have been updated, their aim remains the same. More than 95% of the expenditure of fossil fuel giants like BP is on oil and gas, but they spend millions on advertising campaigns boasting about their meager low-carbon energy output. Shell has spent $84 billion on fossil fuel exploration and development in the space of a few years. But then they ask their social media followers what consumers need to do to cut carbon. As a Harvard expert on the fossil fuel industry's lobbying put it, these companies have gone from, and I quote, blatant denialism to more subtle and insidious forms of delayism. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. The historical record of the fossil fuel industry is being uncovered, showing how it has spent decades propagating climate denialism and disinformation, protecting their profits while endangering our future. So there is no doubt about it. These companies don't have our welfare at heart. They don't have the same interests as my constituents. What's good for fossil fuel billionaires spells disaster for children in Coventry's schools. If there are profits to be made, these companies will extract and exploit, burning fossil fuels and our planet along with them. Next month, Britain hosts COP26. We have a responsibility to show leadership on the world stage, demonstrating that we will rise to this historic challenge with the bold actions needed to avert climate catastrophe, taking on fossil fuel executives and transforming our economy for people and planet. There is a program of change that we need to avert climate catastrophe and transform our economy and society in the interests of the many. That's the Green New Deal. I'm proud to be co-sponsoring the Green New Deal bill alongside my colleagues, including the honourable members for Brighton Pavilion and Norwich South. The Green New Deal recognises the urgency of tackling climate breakdown with a 2030 net zero target, not the 2050 target that condemns us to climate catastrophe. And it will reach that target by decarbonising with the interests of working people front and centre. Yes, rapidly winding down and repurposing fossil fuel industry, taking majority public stakes in fossil fuel companies, but doing so while every worker impacted gets a government-backed jobs guarantee, ensuring that they get a well-paid, unionised job, not left on the scrap heap like has happened in past industrial transitions. And the Green New Deal wouldn't stop there. It would initiate a massive state-led programme of investment in green industries, from building the wind farms and solar panels to power our future, to generating the low-carbon jobs in care and teaching that our communities need. Our bill spells how this programme would create millions of good, well-paid, unionised jobs, and it wouldn't be paid for on the backs of our workers. Our bill spells that a Green New Deal will raise income taxes only on the highest earners and introduce a wealth tax to make the super rich pay their fair share. And to transition from an economy that relies on fossil fuels that kill our planet, it would also bring industries like rail, energy and water into public ownership to rapidly cut carbon, building the high-tech, low-emissions, publicly owned transport for the future. Madam Deputy Speaker, so long as this government and, as I have said, this House, us MPs, fund the fossil fuel industry, backing new projects like the Cambo oil field and pipelines across southern Africa, it can speak with no authority at COP26. It is not part of the answer to the climate emergency, it is simply part of the problem. So instead of investing in fossil fuels, it's time to invest in a Green New Deal. There is no time to waste. Thank you.